The bridge they refused to cross. Chapter 1. The line between two towns. The river ran slow and shallow, barely enough to carry driftwood or reflection. But to the people of East Bend and Westfield, it was deep enough to hold a century's worth of silence. East Bend was brick and steeple, prim front porches and clipped lawns. Westfield was clapboard homes, gravel roads and laughter that carried past dusk. Two towns not more than a few hundred yards apart, yet treated each other like strangers. Worse, the bridge connecting them was old. Wooden, weathered, still strong, but no one used it. Its boards creaked with age, not footsteps. Rusted street lamps lined the path like sentinels from another time. To most kids it was a storybook myth. They heard about the fights, the protests, the curfews that once rang out like warning bells. Parents told their children to stay on this side without explanation. It's just the way things are. Elijah, a 7th grader from East Bend, had always been curious. He saw the bridge from his bedroom window, glowing orange in the morning sun, mist curling beneath it like breath. He'd asked his teacher once why no one used it. She said something about zoning laws and change being slow. But Elijah saw the looks people gave the bridge, the way drivers refused to even glance its way, the way some kids crossed themselves like it was cursed. And on one unusually quiet summer evening, Elijah stood at the edge of the bridge, bike in hand. The cicadas hummed, the river murmured. He stepped forward. The wood groaned beneath his sneakers. From a distance, two curtains parted, one in East Bend, one in Westfield. Someone was watching. There always were. And so it began, not with a protest, not with a speech, but with a single boy crossing into the unknown, disturbing a line no one dared to question anymore. Not until now. Chapter 2. The boy on the wrong side. Elijah hadn't meant to cause a stir. It started with a school assignment, map the history of your town. But the more he read, the more he noticed what was missing. Westfield was barely mentioned in his textbooks, and when he asked why, his teacher offered only a smile and said, "It's another district." So Elijah took his notebook and pedaled across the bridge again. It was early, before most were out, and the fog hugged the river like a secret. Westfield looked different, not just in houses and streets, but in the way people moved. They laughed louder, sat on porches longer. He wandered past a barber shop with music playing out front and a corner store where a boy his age tossed a football in the parking lot. The boy saw Elijah, paused and waved. "You lost?" Elijah hesitated. "Just visiting." "You're from the other side, huh?" the boy asked. "I'm Marcus." They sat on the curb, comparing school lunches and favorite sneakers. It felt normal. But when Elijah returned to East Bend, things didn't feel normal anymore. His mother asked where he'd been. When he told her, she dropped a spoon. "You crossed?" At school, a classmate whispered, "You went over there?" Another just said, "Why?" Rumors moved faster than truth. Some said he was recruiting trouble, others thought he was spying. Elijah didn't understand the fear. He had seen houses, families, a friend. But to the towns on either side, curiosity was a threat. And soon, both East Bend and Westfield were asking, what happens when one boy starts asking questions the rest have been told never to answer? 12-year-old Elijah dared to cross the county line for a school project. What he found wasn't danger, but questions. And when he returned, people on both sides began to whisper. Chapter 3. Sunday Promises and Broken Roads. Sunday in East Bend meant starched shirts, polished shoes, and sermons filled with progress. In Westfield it meant gospel music, laughter outside church steps, and talk of peace, just not the kind that came with headlines. Elijah sat between his parents in the pew that morning, listening to Reverend Carroll talk about unity. "We must build bridges," the man declared, his voice echoing off stained glass. But no one mentioned the one bridge that mattered most. After service, Elisha wandered the old road that ran parallel to the river, its cracked pavement a path once used for processions and parades. Now it was just weeds and whispers. An old woman on her porch nodded at him. "You thinking about the bridge?" she asked. He nodded. She sighed. "My brother marched across it once. Came home with bruises, not answers." On the other side of town, Marcus sat in the back row of Westfield Chapel as Pastor Dornell spoke of patience. "Peace comes to those who wait," he said. But Marcus wondered, what if it doesn't? After church, Marcus walked with his grandfather, who pointed to the crumbled curb where a march had ended years ago. "They promised us change," he said, "but the road they paved us led nowhere." Elijah and Marcus, miles apart, stood on opposite ends of that same broken road, both thinking the same thing. How many Sundays had passed with sermons about unity while bridges went uncrossed? How long can a town pray for peace while refusing to walk toward it? Church bells rang on both sides of the river, but sermons preached different truths. One side promised progress, the other peace, but neither prepared their people for what was coming. Chapter 4. The fence that wasn't there yesterday. It happened overnight. Elijah woke up to the sound of metal clanging, subtle like a wind chime made of chains. When he pulled aside his curtain, he saw it. A fence, silver, sharp, unapologetic, spanning the mouth of the bridge like a freshly drawn scar. There had been no announcement, no town meeting, no warning. At first people thought it was temporary, construction maybe, or a safety precaution, but the sign never came and the fence didn't go. Elijah biked to the edge and stared. It wasn't just the fence that unsettled him, it was how quickly everyone acted like it had always been there. Drivers turned their cars around without a second glance, joggers rerouted, even the birds seemed to avoid the stretch. On the Westfield side, Marcus stared too. He pressed his fingers through the chain link and called across. Elijah answered. "This doesn't make sense," Marcus said. "It's like they're trying to erase the road," Elijah replied. In school, Miss Whitaker hesitated when asked about the fence. "It's complicated," she said. "Best to focus on the assignments." But for Elijah, this was the assignment. He snapped a photo of the fence and taped it to his notebook. Wrote above it in thick black marker, "Who decides what we forget?" That night, someone spray-painted the word "unwelcome" on the East Bend side of the fence. By morning it was painted over, but the fence remained, like a secret no one wanted to admit was real, until it started to rust into memory. One morning, a chain-link fence appeared at the mouth of the bridge. No signs, no explanation, just a barrier where freedom used to be. And the towns acted like it had always been there. Chapter 5. A walk with no return. Horace Williams had lived on the East Bend side his whole life. At 82, his steps were slow but his memory sharp. He remembered the bridge before it became taboo, before silence grew taller than fences. Most knew Horace as the man who swept his porch every morning and waved at children on their way to school. But few knew he once marched with others across that bridge, in a time when marches meant blood. He never talked about it, until the fence appeared. That morning he stood in his yard, wearing his Sunday best even though it was Tuesday. He polished the handle of his old cane, straightened his collar, and walked toward the bridge. People noticed. Curtains parted, phones were lifted, whispers rose like fog behind him. He reached the chain-link barrier and stood there for a moment, his hand brushing the cold metal. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded chair. He sat and waited. 2 hours passed, then 3. Marcus approached first, watching from the Westfield side. Elijah came next, biking quietly to the East Bend edge. Neither said a word. Finally, Horace stood. With surprising strength, he unlatched the temporary fence panel. Someone had left it loose and stepped onto the bridge. He walked slowly, each step a quiet rebellion. When he reached the center, he looked in both directions. Then he kept walking. Some say he crossed into Westfield and was welcomed. Others say he vanished on the bridge itself, like a whisper caught in wind. No one ever saw him again. But every morning after that, someone left a flower at the center of the bridge. Because whether Horace returned or not, his walk had already changed what it meant to stay an old man named Horace. Took his cane and walked the length of the bridge, despite warnings. He never came back. Some say he left for peace. Others say he was forced into it. Chapter 6. Voices on the Water. The river had long been a quiet divide, a soft line where laughter dared not carry too far. But as summer crept in and days grew longer, children returned to its banks, drawn not by rebellion, but by curiosity. On the East Bend side, Elijah and a few classmates skipped stones. On the Westfield side, Marcus and his cousin Mariah played tag near the water's edge. They were all told to stay close, to not wander near the bridge, but no one had said they couldn't speak. At first it was Elijah who shouted across. "Hey!" Marcus turned, smiled. "What's up?" The river didn't echo, it carried. They started with jokes, silly ones. Then came songs, first Happy Birthday, then a clumsy harmony of playground rhymes. One by one, more voices joined in, half laughing, half watching. Mariah recited a poem she had memorized in school. Elijah answered with a rap verse. Back and forth they went, a dialogue over water. For a moment, the river wasn't a barrier. It was a stage, but the moment didn't last. Adults arrived. A mother's voice cut through the air. "Inside, now!" Another man on the Westfield side waved his arms angrily. "Don't talk to them!" Children scattered. The banks emptied, but the sound lingered. Those echoes of laughter, of defiance, dressed as play. That night, Elijah sat by his window and looked at the river. It shimmered in the moonlight, still and soft, but he could still hear it. The voices on the water. Not loud, not angry, just brave Maineville played by the riverbanks and began shouting across the water. Laughter turned to song, then the adults came, and the river grew quiet again, but not forgotten. Chapter 7. The Teacher Who Chose Silence. Miss Whitaker had always worn the same cardigan, the one with the elbow patches and little silver buttons. She taught 7th grade history at East Bend Middle, a room filled with dusty maps and outdated posters of presidents. Her chalkboard was always clean, her tone always neutral. She was known for being fair, respectful, kind, but she was also known for skipping certain parts of the curriculum. When Elijah raised his hand that Tuesday morning and asked, "Why isn't Westfield in our local history book?" the room went still. Miss Whitaker paused. Her chalk froze mid-sentence. "Some things," she said, "are complicated." "But it's just across the bridge," Elijah pressed. Whispers flitted through the class. That night she sat in her kitchen with old newspaper clippings spread across her table, articles yellowed with age, some about the bridge, others about the march that turned violent. One had a photo of her brother, handcuffed, bleeding. She remembered the day clearly, the silence that followed, the warning her father gave her. We don't bring that back up. But something about Elijah's question lingered. The next day, Miss Whitaker returned to the classroom with a different stack of materials, not textbooks, but letters, photographs, testimonials. "This isn't in your history book," she said, placing one photo under the projector. "But it's part of your town." The room was quiet, but attentive. She talked about marches, about protests, about how silence, too, has consequences. At the end of the day, Elijah stayed behind. "Konaho?" he asked. Mas Whitaker smiled sadly, because someone finally asked, and I got tired of being afraid of the answer. Mas Whitaker taught history but skipped certain chapters. When a student asked about the bridge, she changed the subject. Until one day, she didn't. Chapter 8, Fireflies at the County Line. It started with a whisper in the hallway, passed from one locker to the next. Someone from Westfield had a cousin in East Bend. Someone from East Bend still had a grandmother across the river. It wasn't rebellion, it was reunion. By dusk, a group of teenagers from both towns found themselves drawn to the edge of the county line, an open field just a stone's throw from the bridge, hidden by trees and shielded by twilight. It brought nothing but stories. Fireflies blinked lazily around them, lighting up the space like stars too stubborn to stay in the sky. Someone lit a small lantern, casting a soft glow over the circle they formed. Marcus was there, seated beside Mariah. Elijah arrived shortly after, notebook in hand. No one spoke for a long time. And then they did. One by one, they told what they'd been told. My uncle said it's not safe over here. My mom won't even say the name Westfield. She calls it the other side. And they said the last time someone crossed, there was a fight, but no one remembers who started it. The air was warm, but their words shivered. Elijah pulled a folded map from his notebook. It showed the town as one from before the bridge was drawn in as a divide. "This is what it used to be," he said. Someone passed around an old photo. Kids from both towns playing baseball on the same team, faded but undeniable. Mariah took a breath. What if we did it again? Not tomorrow, not all at once, but slowly, together. The group nodded, not with certainty, but with willingness. The fireflies danced above their heads like the sky itself was listening. And for the first time in a long time, hope didn't feel like a fantasy. It felt like a secret meeting of teens from both towns met at dusk. Fireflies lit their circle as they told stories, passed down through families, and dared to dream differently. Chapter 9, The Pastor Who Wouldn't Bless Him. The wedding was supposed to be small, just family, a few friends, and the riverbank where the towns once met without fences. Lily from East Bend and Jalen from Westfield had fallen in love during a summer program, and they were tired of pretending the bridge between them was bigger than their hearts. They asked their church pastors to officiate. East Bend's pastor gave a gentle no, Westfield's gave a harsher one. "It's not the time," one said. "It sends the wrong message," said the other. But Lily and Jalen knew the message they wanted to send. They chose the river anyway. On a late Saturday afternoon, they stood hand in hand beneath an arch made of birch branches and silk. Elijah stood on one side, Marcus on the other. Mariah held the bouquet. Fireflies blinked in the trees like memories returning. No official blessing, no signed papers, but a woman from neither town, an elder who once walked the bridge barefoot in protests, stood up. "I can't give you a license," she said, "but I can give you something better, witness." And as the sun dipped behind the water, the vows were spoken. Some say it wasn't real, others say it was more real than anything their towns had ever allowed. The next morning, someone wrote love crosses in white chalk on the Westfield sidewalk. It rained that evening, but the words didn't wash away. Neither did the promise a wedding between a girl from Easttown and a boy from Westside was planned by the river. Their pastor refused to officiate, but someone else stepped in. Chapter 10, Mud on Their Shoes, Blood on Their Hands. It started with a message sprayed across the East Bend Middle School wall in red paint, traitor, bold, jagged, fresh. Elisha saw it before the janitor did. His stomach dropped not just from the word, but from what it meant. Someone had been watching. Someone was angry. Whispers followed him through the hallway like shadows. Some students moved aside when he passed. Others stared. And one boy, older, louder, shouldered into him hard. "You think you're brave? You're just stupid," the boy spat. "My granddaddy says the bridge ain't meant to be crossed." Elijah kept walking. Later that day, near the fence, he found a flyer torn in half. It was for the student-led storytelling circle he and Marcus had helped organize. The words, "Why are we still apart?" were shredded down the middle. That evening, Marcus messaged Elijah, "Meet me at the fence after dark. I found something." They met by flashlight, kneeling near the tall grass on the Westfield side. Someone had left a notebook, pages filled with slurs, threats, and dates. "It's like a record," Marcus said, "of everyone who crossed the bridge." The list had their names on it. 2 nights later, a scuffle broke out behind the East Bend Rec Center. Marcus had been followed. A group of boys shoved him down, pushed his face in the mud. Elijah ran toward them, yelling, but it was too late. Blood dripped from Marcus's lip. Police were called, but no report was filed. "It was just boys being boys," an officer said. "Don't stir things up." Elijah sat beside Marcus afterward, holding an ice pack to his friend's face. "This isn't about old grudges," Elijah whispered. "It's about fear." Marcus nodded. "Then let's make them afraid of the truth." Graffiti appeared overnight. One word, "traitor." Then a boy was pushed near the bridge. The line between harmless division and hatred blurred fast. Chapter 11. The bridge they refused to cross. It was a warm Saturday in early April when the flyer first appeared, taped to lampposts, pinned to bulletin boards, even tucked beneath windshield wipers. Its headline, bold and simple, "Unity Walk, Honoring Those Who Crossed." The plan was to gather at either end of the bridge, East Bend and Westfield, and meet in the middle. No speeches, no chants, just a walk. A step toward something the town had never truly done together. Remember. Elijah stood at the East Bend side, holding a white carnation. Marcus was on the Westfield side, gripping a folded letter in his hand. Horace's letter left behind in a notebook found by the bridge weeks earlier. People gathered slowly, families, elders, kids with uncertain eyes. There were some side eyes, too. A few onlookers muttered beneath their breath. Others stood with crossed arms on porches. At noon, the bells from both churches chimed. The walk began. Elijah stepped forward. So did Marcus. But many stayed behind. Some turned back, fearful of being seen. A few refused to join at all. And still, the boys walked. When they reached the center, they placed the carnation and the letter between the planks. Elijah looked out across the river, the silence now something different. Charged, but not empty. From behind, footsteps echoed. First 2, then 5, then 10 more. The march didn't flood the bridge. It didn't roar, but it moved, soft as a prayer, strong as a promise. The bridge once feared, now felt the weight of feet returning. They walked not to demand attention, but to show the town what it meant to keep going, even when most refused to. A memorial march was planned to honor those who once tried to unite the towns, but when the day came, most stayed behind. Fear held them back, but not all. Chapter 12. What the river remembered. The storm came without warning, thunder cracking like bone, wind sweeping through East Bend and Westfield, as if it remembered something the towns had long tried to forget. Rain fell for 2 days. The river swelled, angry and full, creeping past the roots of old trees and pulling at the banks with muddy fingers. The bridge held, but barely. Roads flooded, power flickered, and when the clouds cleared, the river had reshaped the land. Elijah and Marcus were the first to return to the bridge. They walked carefully, boots squelching through wet soil, water still pooling near the edge. The sun broke through mist in soft rays, revealing something glinting in the mud. Marcus knelt first. A plot, half buried, rusted around the corners but still legible. The engraving read, "In honor of the families who stood together across the river." Names followed, last names they recognized from both towns. Elijah ran his fingers over the letters. "This was here before?" Marcus shook his head. "No one ever said so." They called for help. Miss Whittaker arrived with a history book in one hand and a crowbar in the other. With care, they lifted the plaque free. More people came. Old-timers nodded in disbelief. Some remembered vague stories of unity marches before the bridge was closed. And beneath the earth, the river had remembered. Photos of the plaque made the local paper. "Hidden history revealed after storm," the headline read. For a moment, truth washed over the town like the flood water it came from. Because rivers do not forget. They just wait for someone brave enough to listen. A flood unearthed old markers, revealing a forgotten plaque, names of families who once stood together. The river hadn't erased them, just buried them until the world was ready. Chapter 13. The Banner That Split the Town. It was Marcus's idea, a banner to stretch across the bridge from East Bend to Westfield, hung high for all to see, painted in bold blue letters in white cloth. One town, one people. They stayed up all night painting it, Elijah, Marcus, Mariah, and two more friends. They borrowed an old projector from Miss Whittaker's class to trace the letters onto fabric in Elijah's garage. Mariah brought pizza. Elijah's little sister handed them clothespins like they were treasures. By dawn, their fingers were sticky with paint, but the banner was done. It smelled like fresh hope and old resolve. They tied it up at sunrise. Elijah stood on the East Bend side, securing one corner to the lamppost. Marcus, across the bridge, wrapped the other end around the old iron railing of Westfield. They watched it sway together. One piece of cloth, one idea, stretched over a divide older than either of them. By midday, the banner had been noticed. Some smiled, some scoffed, some took photos, others called the school board. In East Bend, an older man muttered, "Now they want to pretend we're the same?" In Westfield, a woman shook her head and whispered, "We tried before, look where it got us." Miss Whittaker didn't say anything when students brought it up, but she changed her class reading for the week to a collection of essays called Bridges That Last. The school boards issued no comment, the churches remained silent, but that night, Elijah's parents set 2 extra chairs at dinner for Marcus and Mariah. Later, rain rolled in quietly, a soft tapping that felt like breath against the windows. The kids didn't sleep well. When the sun rose the next morning, the banner was still there, barely. It had been cut down the middle, clean, precise. Each side lay limp, one half fluttering in East Bend, the other in Westfield. No message, no confession, just silence. Photos spread online. Some blamed the kids, others accused neighbors, a few defended it as an act of necessary realism. The local paper ran the headline, "Unity or Naivety." At school, no one made eye contact, but Marcus found a note in his locker. It read, "We saw. It mattered." That afternoon, Elijah stood at the bridge alone. He held the torn half of the banner. The wind pulled at it like it wanted to take it away, but Elijah didn't let go. That evening, they all met again in the garage. This time, they didn't just paint. They embroidered, they stitched every letter with care. They added quotes along the borders from Voices of the Past. They even wrote their own names on the back. For Elijah and Marcus, it wasn't the loss of the cloth that hurt. It was how fast the town showed its fault line. But they weren't finished, because unity might tear. but it could also be sewn again. Stronger this time, a student hung a banner reading, "One town, one people," across the bridge. By morning it was torn in two, and so was the town's illusion of unity. Chapter 14. Their Names in the Stone. The proposal came from a group of students, Elijah and Marcus among them, who believed that memory should have a place that couldn't be torn down, washed away, or ignored. They drafted letters, attended school board meetings, and stood outside grocery stores with clipboards and petitions. They held classroom discussions, hosted town history nights, even created a short documentary that played during both schools' morning announcements. Some adults rolled their eyes, others sighed. The movement grew. They called themselves the Stone Circle, a name borrowed from the idea that memory, like a stone thrown into water, sends ripples farther than you can see. The proposal was simple: a stone memorial at the center of the bridge. Not political, not dramatic, just names. Names of those who had crossed, stood, spoken, or fallen because they believed the river didn't have to divide forever. Some suggested bronze, others suggested murals, but Elijah stood up at a meeting and said, "Paint can be washed, metal can rust, but stone remembers." There was pushback, questions, debates. "Why dredge up the past?" some asked. "Isn't it enough that the fence is gone?" others said. "We need to move forward, not backward." But the students persisted. They gathered over 1,200 signatures, held candlelight vigils, interviewed elders, spoke on local radio shows, even hosted an exhibit called Bridgewalkers, featuring artifacts, letters, and photos. Months passed. Finally, the school board voted a narrow majority, approval. And then, one crisp autumn morning, a crew arrived with ropes and pulleys. The stone was placed beneath the memorial arch at the bridge's center. It was small, about the height of a child's desk, smooth, gray, and unassuming until you looked closer. Etched into its face were names: Horace Williams, Lily and Jalen. Anonymous entries: families who once hosted unity picnics, elders who had spoken truth in church basements. At the bottom, a single line: "They walked. We remember." People gathered quietly from both towns. Some laid flowers, some stood in silence, some just walked by and nodded. There was no ceremony, no speeches, but someone brought a cello and began playing softly. The air didn't need words, the stone spoke them. Over the weeks, people kept returning. Someone left a photo of Horace, another left a school pin, children added drawings, folded into tiny paper cranes. One morning, Miss Whitaker brought her entire class. "History," she said, "is not in your books today, it's under your feet." And on that bridge, for the first time, memory had a home. Not in stories, not in whispers. Instead, students demanded a memorial for those lost to silence and hate. After months of protest, a single stone was placed at the bridge's center, etched with names and hope. Chapter 15. A future they walked toward. The day was bright with just enough wind to make the banners flutter like breath held too long. Graduation caps bobbed atop heads, gowns swishing as students from both East Bend and Westfield made their way toward the bridge, not led by principals or officials, but by each other. The bridge, once avoided, now stood waiting, witness to a moment it had never known before. Not fear, not silence, but celebration. Elijah wore his cords like armor. Marcus carried the class flag. Mariah had a stack of small handwritten notes in her gown pocket. Each one a quote from a person who once tried to cross the bridge, from stories they had unearthed during the last year of research. Their classmates trailed behind, some laughing nervously, others silent with awe. They didn't wait for applause. They didn't need approval. They had waited long enough. At the foot of the bridge, a pause. Then, arms linked, they stepped forward. Onlookers lined both sides, parents wiping eyes, teachers standing taller than usual, younger siblings on tiptoe to see. Some elders stood with folded hands, faces unreadable. The towns had gathered, not in protest, not in defense, but in witness. Each step echoed louder than cheers, each step a memory reclaimed. Midway across, the students stopped at the memorial stone. Elijah knelt to place a folded program beneath it. It read, "To those who made this crossing possible." Marcus added a tassel. Mariah unfolded the top note and read aloud, "They told us we couldn't walk here, but we stood still long enough, and now the world has caught up." Some students touched the stone gently, others stood in quiet reverence. A breeze swept across the water, stirring the trees on both banks. Distant bells chimed from both towns' churches, different melodies but ringing together. They continued across, and when they reached the other side, something happened. More footsteps. Parents followed, teachers too, then neighbors. People who had once looked away, now looking ahead. People who had whispered, now spoke. Who had hesitated, now joined. Some brought flowers, others brought nothing but their presence. It wasn't a parade, it wasn't a march, it was a movement shaped by footsteps and stories and stone. Children skipped ahead, playing on the far end of the bridge. One little girl placed her toy bear beside the stone. "So they don't feel alone," she said. An elder from Westfield, cane in hand, whispered, "I never thought I'd live to see this." Beside him, a woman from East Bend nodded. "We're not there yet, but maybe we're close enough to hope." At the far end of the bridge, the students tossed their caps into the sky. The wind caught them, and for a moment they looked like birds, unbound. Families embraced, old rivalries softened, laughter mingled with tears. The two towns, for one moment, breathed the same air without tension. And someone, no one knows who, started humming a tune. Others joined. It wasn't a school song or a church hymn. It was something new, something that sounded like the bridge itself finding its voice. The bridge no longer belonged to the past. It belonged to everyone who dared to imagine something better. No more fences, no more silence, just the soft sound of shoes on wood carrying a generation forward. We're not into perfection, but into possibility.